to start with 4 strands of the 1mm width paper, and I'm going to wind this a little bit differently than I typically would. In a lot of tutorials or things that I've shown, I have you glue one piece to the next piece and then roll it up as one. In this one, I'm doing it a little bit differently because I have better results with it being a little more even and with the coloring so that it doesn't get glommed up in one area. And I'll show the coloring in a little bit, but this is how I do it when I am working on a tight coil that I'm going to eventually shape. I do like to wrap it in this method. So I start with the first one, just standard wrap. Let me just do it really quickly. And then, not too quickly to screw it up. But when I get, and here's where the difference is going to be. When I get to the end of the first strip, I'm going to leave a tail. And I like to leave one that's a few inches long, you know, at least 2 on the first strip. If I've got multiple strips, each tail that I leave is going to grow each time. And the reason that you do that, and I'll show you, is that you don't want it, this one, the new one, to keep falling out. So here's the first one, and what I'm doing is I am just tucking it under, and then I'm holding it with my nail or the tip of your finger, and then you're going to roll that second, start rolling that second strip. And as you do that, you're going to see this little tail flip out. That's okay, just keep rolling. And now it's secure. So then the next one that I do, which will be my third one, I'm going to start with a little bit longer tail. And the reason, again, that I do that is I do want to keep it secure. And now your roll is a little bit bigger around. So you have to make your tail a little bit bigger. So I'm going to tuck it. This is so hard to do when I'm doing it away from my face. And then you're going to roll it until the little end flops out. So, because I'm doing this away from my face, it's harder for me to see what I'm doing here. So let me go back. Okay, once you have it secured underneath, then you're going to start wrapping again. I like to keep it between my nails or between my fingers so that the wrap stays on one level. And there's the little end that flipped out. Okay, so that's the third one. And then on the fourth one, I'm gonna unwind it just a tiny bit. And then the fourth one goes underneath my thumb. Just like that. And then I'm gonna hold it and hopefully not hold the new strand. So it flipped out. You can see the little tail that flipped out right there. And then roll it up to the end. And that's my coil. Okay, so now we have our 5 tight coils. One thing I want to point out really quickly, this is a side note, but I want to show my board. I do cover this in some of my other videos, but it's one of those things I think it's always really good to keep covering certain things. This is just a regular bulletin board that I have drawn my lines on. And then I've covered it with Glad Press and Seal. And the reason that I do that is that if you look closely to my board, I have all of my little notes on it. I write lengths and colors and all of that kind of stuff on here so that I have notes when I'm moving forward. And then when it gets to where it's curling up or it's getting old, I can just simply peel it off and reapply. I also do that because I can also, if I'm in the middle of something, I can just even put my glue right there on it and use it as a glue pot if I'm in a hurry or I have just one thing I need to glue. So I wanted to cover that. One thing with the tight coils that I did want to point out is that when we're doing this particular project, do not wrap these too tight. And the reason that that can happen is when you have multiple strips that you are curling, if you put them in too tight and you go to remove your tool, this is what happens. And so it's something that I know better than to do, but to be honest, I was watching TV and not paying attention. And so I wanted to show it. It's one of those things that happens to the best of us. You can salvage it a lot of times. You can cut it off and, you know, spend some time rewinding that and insert it back in there. I don't ever particularly like to do that because I feel like it's a waste of time for, you know, the 3 cents that I'm saving. But if you're short on strips, it's perfectly fine to do that. And I have done it in the past. It's just that at this particular juncture, I didn't think it was worth it. I wanted to start with some clean coils. But these are my 5 coils. And next, I'm going to show you how to color them, and then we will shape them and glue them together. Okay, so choose your colors. I'm going to be using this bright lemon yellow and this sort of salmon color to color my coils. I like to use Q-tips, just like with any sort of art project. Blending is always the key, and when you're working on coils, it's very difficult to use paint because it will soak into the paper at different rates depending upon what side of the paper is rolled and what side you're coloring on. It will also get in between the grooves and it will travel around a groove. So I have found that pastels are the best option for this type of coloring. There are lots of other options. I just particularly like pastels. So you can use whatever works for you, but I'm going to show you what my method is. So what I do, I like to keep my coil flat when I'm coloring it. So I'm just going to load up my Q-tip here. And you can use brushes for this, but I have found on a coil that Q-tip works just a little better. And I'm just going to color some of it. I'm not going to do the whole thing because with these types of flowers, the outside edges are usually lighter color than the insides. Then I'm going to turn my Q-tip over and use the virgin side, and I'm going to blend. And I'm just going to kind of rub it around in there so that it's nice and powdery soft and it doesn't look all glomped on one area. So then I'll take a clean one for my salmon color, going to load it up, okay, just a little bit. I'm going to do almost like a pizza shape here. I'm not going to go all the way to the center though, because I want it to be very subtle once I put my flowers together. So I've gone up to my centerpiece with my yellow. I'm going to go about halfway with my salmon color. And as you can see, it's kind of sticking to the different types of coil. So I'm going to turn this over to the virgin side of this Q-tip, and I'm going to rub again, but you're going to rub a little lighter this time. You don't want your salmon color coming off, but if you can just kind of do it in little circles, that will help keep it nice and subtle. Because the point with this type of coloring is you don't want it to be super obvious. The more subtle it is, the more real the flower will look. So that's the first one, and then I'll just go ahead and do this one too. I'm kind of wasteful, so I always use a clean Q-tip. You can reuse them if you like, but I notice that they do like to come apart. So I don't like to reuse them if I can avoid it. So there goes my yellow. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly correct, because nature is never exactly correct. I'm just trying to make it as subtle as possible. And then I'm going to just load this up a little bit. And you can even just tap it on there if you like. But again, you're going to want to just sort of blend in little circles or blend it out in to the areas. You can also tap it, sort of like when you do your makeup blends. I personally like the circle method, but there you go. So now that we have them colored, I will show you how we shape these. So this is going to be the center of the flower. The little pink area is going to be the center of the flower. So first step is to make these concave. You can do this on a, I believe it's called a grate board, where you can dome them out on the grate board to make them exactly the same. But I don't really worry about that too much, especially when we're trying to mimic what nature does. Some are going to be flatter than others and some are not. So once you have a little bit of a concave on it, then we're just going to pinch right there where the salmon color is. Now, from the side, you're going to see that it's collapsed a little bit as far as the dome is concerned, and that's okay, because what I like to do is I also like to bend my flower out just a tiny bit so that it has sort of a little curve on the petal itself. It'll just give it, again, a little more natural look. So once you have the shape that you want, I might even close this down just a little so it's not too deep. Then I will take some school glue and I'm going to coat the outside of this particular one and let it dry before we assemble the flower. Okay, so 24 hours have passed and my coating on the outside is dry, and this is what we're left with. So all there is left is to glue them together. So if you've seen the pictures, you know that they are sort of offset petals and they're sort of at an angle. And trying to show this has been a little difficult, but they're sort of at an angle, and they're not going to be flat one direction or the other. You don't want them straight up and down. You sort of want them to be laying at a bit of an angle. So I have found that when I do this, I use pens quite a bit to put them on my board at an angle. So I'm going to show you the first one, and then I'll just have some pictures of how I add them later. But so I just put a drop of glue on this one, and I want them to connect together at the tip. And this takes a little bit of patience because they do need to be at an angle that's not sort of natural to your board. So what I do is I take my pins and I put my pins in at about a 45-degree angle, just to give the paper a little bit of support like that. And then I'll do the same here. And then I will also put some on the edge of each petal so that it doesn't slide forward like it just did. But that's how I do that. So I'm going to put it on fast forward and finish gluing the petals.